And we're joined by Gretchen Rubin. Her newest book, I have it right here, is called Happier at Home. Great to see you, Gretchen.
I'm very happy to be here.
This is great. You know what, though, was interesting when we were talking to those folks? You ask them what makes them happy, and they all smiled while they were talking about it. So maybe is that part of it, thinking about what makes us happy?
I think that's exactly right. Sometimes people argue that if you try to be happy, you'll sort of trip over your own feet. But in my experience, just asking yourself, am I happy? Can I be happier? Really helps focus your attention on the things that do make you happy, and maybe the little things you could do as part of your everyday life to make yourself a little bit happier.
You know, Gretchen, this really hits home for me because when I was growing up, my mom, when they had special license plates in New Jersey, the first time they ever let people do it, my mom got one, and I wanted to share it. I've shared it with the audience before. I want to share it with you.
Excellent.
This is what she put on her license plate. I guess is a little message for me and the rest of the world to just be happy. What did you find? You know, how do you just be happy?
Well, I think
big question, right?
Well, about 50% of it is genetically determined. So a lot of people are born, you know, more Tiggers, and some people are more Eeyores. But a big part of it is something that we can change by the way that we think and the way that we act. So if we do little things like take time to play with our dog or get a little bit of exercise, these small things can actually make a big effect on our daily happiness.
And that goes right in with our theme today. We're talking about people living in tiny houses. Just small things can make us happy. Maybe it's a tiny house. We also did this. We went to the streets and asked people, and I know you call them your pigeons of discontent. We kind of called it the little, what do we call them? The tiny roadblocks to happiness. And we asked people, so I want you to listen to these folks and then tell us how we can make them happy. Let's take a look.
Tiny roadblocks to my happiness are not enough time. My time is crunched because I go to college full-time and I work almost full-time. Because I go to work and school so much, there's a lack of sleep, definitely, and it takes up a lot of my time.
Time is her roadblock, her pigeon of discontent. How do we solve that?
Well, that's certainly one of the most pressing and common pigeons of discontent, but she mentioned something else, which is sleep. And the first thing to start with happiness is getting enough sleep, especially when you're really busy like that. I mean, most adults need at least 7 hours of sleep a night. A lot of adults are chronically sleep deprived.
I hope my wife is listening.
Right?
You know, she's in bed and she's got the iPad, the iPhone. Always. I said, you wanted to go to bed early. Go to sleep.
Go to sleep. Turn off the light. Give yourself a bedtime, just like a toddler. Figure out what time you wake up in the morning. Do the math. Give yourself 7 or 8 hours, and it will. Everything else in your life seems easier.
She'll be happier?
Absolutely.
Honey, your bedtime, 10 o'clock. I want you to sleep 10 o'clock tonight. Do you understand? 10 o'clock.
Do it for a week and you feel amazing.
All right, let's take a look at another one of our people on the street.
Tiny roadblocks to happiness would be delayed flights or traffic and all that. People that don't understand how to drive.
He doesn't like people to understand how to drive, and he has problems at the airports, right?
Right. Well, one of the things to do is if you know you're going to have a long commute or a flight delay, figure out ways to get more value out of that time. So listening to audiobooks or podcasts if you're stuck in traffic. Or I've heard a friend of mine who travels all the time only reads novels when she's traveling. She doesn't have time to read fiction any other time, but she saves it. Another friend of mine never eats dessert, but he allows himself to have dessert if he's stuck in an airport. So he finds a way to give himself a little something to make that time
That's what I do. I bring my iPod, right? I don't have an iPhone. I have an iPod with music on. I listen to the classics. You know, like Casey and the Sunshine Band, Donna Summer, disco classics.
And if you remember, when you're stuck with business travel, just imagine what it would be like if you had a lot of little kids with you, and that will allow you to be grateful because you can just listen to your music and enjoy yourself.
All right, we've got one more. Take a listen.
A tiny roadblock to happiness that I did not plan for was losing my job, getting aid. I've never had to do that before.
For him, he lost his job and he's got to ask for help now. So how does he smile?
Well, that's not such a tiny roadblock. I mean, losing your job is a major happiness challenge. And one of the things about money is, like health, it affects us mostly in the negative when we don't have it or when we're worried about it. It really brings us down. But then once we have it, we tend to take it for granted and not think about how important it is to our happiness. So one thing to do when you're facing a major happiness challenge like that is to really tell yourself to examine what you do have to be grateful for. The health of your family, your strong friends, a walk in the park. Because when you're really feeling very anxious about a very important part of your life like that, to remember what you have and to be grateful for that, not to take it for granted, can sometimes alleviate those feelings of anxiety.
You know, this is your second book. Your first book, so successful. Tell me about the response. What people were saying to you afterwards.
Well, it's been enormously gratifying as a writer because you
Makes you happy.
Oh my God, it makes me very happy because you always hope that your work is going to strike a chord with other people, and it's been thrilling for me that it has resonated with people. And of course, it's fascinating for me to hear what is it that people do or experience. Like, one of the things I write about in Happier at Home is that I'm a very fearful driver, and I really had to work on getting myself back behind the wheel. And I thought I was the only person who had this, and I've been hearing from a lot of people who are like, oh, I'm afraid to drive, I'm afraid to swim, I'm afraid to do public speaking. And so it was very reassuring for me to realize that it was more common than I thought.
Gretchen, thanks so much. Look at that smile. She's smiling. We're all smiling. Come on, folks, be happy.